last week called Codestock. I have just one app on the App Store, so I'm not an expert in any of this. It's something I've been working with since about October of last year. Went to WWDC this year, so saw some of that. So I have some pretty good idea of what's going on with it, but you know, I may not be as advanced as some of you guys if you have several apps published or something like that. And out of curiosity, does anybody have any apps already published that's in here right now? The objectives for this session, really, the idea is I'd love for everybody here to be able to sit down and write an iPhone app as soon as we're done. But realistically, we have about 2.5 hours, and that's just not going to happen. So what I'm hoping for is at least you'll see the tools, because all the tools are pretty much brand new, unless you've been on Mac for a while. They're pretty different from what you've seen on Windows, some similarities, or even Java or Eclipse. But at least you'll see what tools are there. We're going to cover some of the tools, at least the main tools. And there's a couple more advanced ones that I'll at least touch on, but we're not going to really spend a lot of time on them. The basic concepts and frameworks. There's a couple of design patterns. I know everybody's been talking about that. Especially in the .NET world, there's been a whole lot of talk about all kinds of design patterns. And in Apple world, it's not much different. There's a couple of design patterns that you pretty much see all the time on iPhone OS. So it's important you at least know what those are, because you're going to have to use them, or you lose a lot of freebies basically Apple gives you. And the frameworks, it's more or less like if you're from Java or .NET, the base class library type things. Apple has an equivalent of it, but you'll see a little bit of that. This pretty much what you'll use to do most of the work. And really, the end goal of this is at least give you a starting point. If you have an idea of an app you want to do, or you're curious, is it even worth it? You know, what's involved? Is it something you're interested in? At least that's my goal. Is at least you guys will understand that much of it to see, you know, do you want to proceed with it, or where do you go from here? Really quick agenda. The first part is going to be all about the tools, the frameworks, the things you're going to need to know to see the actual code. I'm hoping to focus most of it on actually building the app, but it's just there's some stuff you're going to have to see before that. At the very end, I have a little bit about just tips and suggestions, at least from what I've learned, in case you do decide to go ahead and build an app and try to publish it to the App Store. And then I'm hoping to leave a little bit of time for questions at the end. And if not, there's an open space tomorrow we can talk about it. As far as getting started, before you can even really look at building an app, you're going to have a Mac. Like, there's no way you can do it on Windows. There are some other tool chains that are good for jailbroken iPods where you can do it, or iPod touches, but really you have to have a Mac. It has to be running an Intel CPU, and you have to have Leopard. If you have that, then you can sign up for the free developer program at Apple's website. I'll have a link in here later. You won't be able to deploy to a device, but you can actually write code. You can do everything you'll see today, at least. And the iPhone OS SDK, as soon as you're a registered developer, you can download that. And that's totally free. So at least getting started, as long as you have a Mac and Leopard, you're good to go for at least everything you'll see right now. You just won't be able to publish it or sell it just yet. When you get ready to publish it and sell it, you have to pay $100 a year to Apple for the registered developer program. And really, that doesn't give you any more tool. It just gives you a certificate you have to actually put it on the store and sell it. You're going to have a device. They don't require it, but if you don't test on a device, you really should be publishing it. If you're going to publish, you have to have a bank account before you can even do anything. They won't let you put it on the store without some kind of a bank account, so they can pay you, even if you don't sell anything. They won't even list it. And time, if you've watched any of these blogs, follow any of this App Store stuff that's been going on the last year or so, you'll see that, like, to submit an app, it takes maybe a couple of weeks before you hear back. You get rejected. It takes a while to submit it again. It takes a lot of time to do these things. And then on top of that, building your app, Apple recommends you spend at least half your time on design, not just architecture, but actual design of the app, the interface, and the inner workings and everything. So it really takes a lot of time to design this compared to some other platforms. And this is just something from talking to some other, particularly .NET developers, but I'm sure it applies to Java developers and other newer languages, I guess, is when you start seeing this stuff, initially it feels like a step back. Like, a lot of things are things that people have been doing maybe 10 years ago, and you're going to be doing them again. And a lot of people are really frustrated by that, and that's just kind of the way this is. It's a mobile platform. Everything's high performance, so you're working at a little lower level. There are some nice things hidden in here, and that's the power of the frameworks. There's a core library that's really good that you don't really realize how much power is in it until you start using it. Developer tool maturity. If you've used Eclipse or Visual Studio recently, they have all kinds of nice features in Apple's tools, they have some of them, but it's kind of hit and miss. So they have some good stuff, but a lot of things you're used to, especially like plugins, like if you use like ReSharp or .NET or things like that, you're not going to have those in Apple's world. You're going to be doing a lot more by yourself. And the other thing is the odd language. Objective-C is the language you use for this, and it has a really kind of weird syntax initially, at least. It doesn't take very long to get used to, but initially it looks really weird. So just give it a little time and it'll grow. The tool chain we're going to be talking about is Xcode is pretty much the main thing you're going to be using in combination with Interface Builder. And we'll talk a lot in detail about those. You'll see those in action. iPhone OS Simulator is the actual application you're going to be running on the Mac to let you run your application before you deploy your device. And that's as far as you can go if you don't pay Apple to deploy it to your devices. But this will do everything we'll do in the demo. It will run. There are some things that may or may not run. Instruments is going to be a more advanced tool that I'll just really briefly touch on. And Shark is pretty much the most advanced tool in the suite, and I'm barely going to mention it, but I want to make sure it's out there so you know what it is. In case you have this particular problem, you know where to look. Xcode is more or less the IDE you're going to be using. This equivalent to Eclipse and Visual Studio. It has the syntax highlighting for the code. It has some refactoring support. It has some IntelliSense support. All your building and debugging is done all within this UI. There's different modes you can use it in. There is a one window mode that you'll see that I use. There are other ways you can turn on where you have these multiple windows you can spread all across your desktop. So it is a little weird, especially coming from anything like where it really is a truly integrated IDE where everything's in one window. This one, everything on this platform is going to take a little while to get used to. But as far as if you've done Unix development, GCC is the compiler underneath this right now. And a lot of the error messages you're going to see are going to be from that. So if you've worked with that before, you've seen those, and they're more cryptic than what you may be used to. And debugging is all done through the GDB debugger. So you have a lot of power in there if you know how to use it, but a lot of the more advanced things are going to require command line type operations to do. There are some visual things, but a lot of the more advanced things are just down in the command line access to this. Interface Builder is more or less the design surface. You won't actually write code in here, but you'll write all the code in Xcode, and then there's things called zibs, XIB files, that they are basically where you lay out your UI. And this thing, it doesn't really do anything special for you other than helps you position everything. You can do everything in here in code. And there's really no performance hit for doing this because of the way it stores things. But it really is, if you have a complex layout, a lot of people like to go to Interface Builder, but then again, it's not going to give you anything. If you're already comfortable with figuring out what pixel coordinates where things go on the screen, this isn't going to give you anything. It may even be more of a headache than if you actually just wrote the code. But if you can use it, Apple suggests you use it. A lot of people that have a lot of Mac apps out there that are more well-known apps do use this. So it's kind of your preference. For demos, I will be using it just so you can see what it is. But again, you don't have to use this. The last thing is it generates binary objects. So instead of some languages that will generate like a script file or something that will be run at runtime to build your screens, this actually creates whatever screen you see. It takes it and condenses it down into binary code and just runs it in the native. The window binary code is already saved, so it just literally throws up on the screen instead of having to parse it. So there really is no overhead for using this if you choose to. The iPhone OS Simulator is just like you expect it to be. It looks like an iPhone. It runs pretty much everything the iPhone does. The things to keep in mind, though, is that it's a thin layer over OS 10. So what happens is there are certain things you can do in the simulator that you can do on OS 10, but when you try to put them on your device, your iPhone or iPod Touch, they aren't going to work, and they're going to break, and it's pretty much going to crash. And it's just not going to stop you, because they didn't have a good way of separating out some of these libraries. They just kind of hook in over what OS 10 does. The other thing that's really important to remember is this is not an emulator, it's just a simulator. You can't test performance on this. You can't test certain things like email. It's really just the core logic you're testing on this thing. Really, to make sure your app works on here, even like memory usage, all that stuff is not valid on this. All the debugging tools, there are very few that actually give you much useful results from this. They may run with it, but they're not going to be very useful or accurate.